Hey there, science fans! Welcome to another mind-bending journey into the world of the unknown. Today we're diving into a scenario that might sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's a fascinating thought experiment that will leave you pondering the very fabric of our existence. Have you ever thought about what would happen if gravity just disappeared? I mean, poof! Gone! Imagine waking up one morning, stepping out of bed, and instead of your feet hitting the floor, you start floating towards the ceiling. Sounds crazy, right? It sounds crazy, right? But stick with me because things would get really wild, really fast. Picture this. You're outside, enjoying a sunny day, and suddenly, you notice that everything around you is starting to lift off the ground. People, cars, trees, everything is floating. We take gravity for granted. It's what keeps our feet on the ground and our planet in one piece. It's the invisible force that holds everything together, from the smallest pebble to the tallest skyscraper. Without it, our world would be in complete disarray. But without it, our world would be turned upside down. Literally. Imagine trying to go about your daily routine in a world where up and down no longer exist. It would be like living in a topsy-turvy funhouse, but with much higher stakes. Imagine floating up into the air instead of walking to school. Kids would be drifting away from playgrounds and parents would be desperately trying to keep them grounded. The simple act of getting from one place to another would become a monumental challenge. Or your lunchbox drifting away in the cafeteria. Lunchtime would turn into a chaotic scramble to catch your food before it floats out of reach. And forget about sitting down to eat. You'd have to figure out how to keep yourself anchored while you munch on your sandwich. It sounds fun for about 5 seconds, right? The novelty of floating around like an astronaut might be exciting at first, but the reality would quickly set in. Without gravity, our bodies would struggle to function properly. Our muscles and bones rely on the constant pull of gravity to stay strong and healthy. But what would happen next? The initial confusion and excitement would give way to panic and chaos. People would be disoriented, unable to control their movements. Everyday tasks would become nearly impossible, and the world as we know it would be thrown into turmoil. Buckle up, because we're about to explore the mind-blowing chaos of a day without gravity. From the scientific implications to the sheer madness of a gravity-free world, we're going to break it all down. So hold on tight and get ready for a wild ride through a universe where the rules of physics are turned on their head. Let's dive in and see what happens when gravity takes a vacation. The moment gravity vanishes, everything not bolted down would start to float. That's because gravity is what keeps us grounded. Without it, we'd be like balloons that were just let go. But here's the thing, Earth is spinning, fast. So, as we float up, we'd also be moving sideways at hundreds of miles per hour. People, cars, trees, even animals, everything would be tossed around like clothes in a dryer. Talk about a bad hair day. Gravity isn't just about keeping our feet on the ground, it also holds our atmosphere in place. That's the blanket of air that surrounds Earth and allows us to breathe. Without gravity, the atmosphere would drift off into space. And guess what? No air means no breathing. Not good.
And it gets worse. The air pressure around us would drop super fast. This would cause all kinds of problems, like making our ears pop and maybe even making water boil at room temperature.
Speaking of water, guess what else gravity holds in place? Yep, our oceans, lakes, and rivers. Without gravity, water would lose its grip on the Earth's surface. Imagine giant blobs of water floating away into space. And forget about surfing. The oceans would be a chaotic mess.
This would be a disaster for all the creatures that live in the water. And for us land dwellers? Well, no more swimming, boating, or drinking water. Yikes!
So far we've seen what would happen to the stuff on Earth's surface, but what about the planet itself?
Without gravity, Earth would start to fall apart. You see, our planet is held together by a balance of forces. Gravity pulls everything towards the center, while internal pressure pushes outward.
Without gravity, that balance would be broken. Earth's crust, the solid outer layer, would crack and crumble. Volcanoes would erupt, and earthquakes would shake the planet apart. Talk about a bad day on Earth.
Speaking of things floating away, let's not forget about our moon. The moon orbits Earth because of, you guessed it, gravity. Without gravity, the moon would be like a ship without an anchor. It would simply drift away into the vastness of space.
Now this might sound kind of cool, but it would have some serious consequences. The moon's gravity controls our tides. Without it, the oceans would be all messed up. Plus, The moon helps stabilize Earth's axis, which keeps our seasons from going haywire.
Okay, so we've established that a day without gravity would be a total disaster for Earth. Imagine walking down the street and suddenly everything starts floating. Cars, bikes, even the food from the market stalls would be up in the air. It would be absolute chaos. But let's dive deeper into what this means for us humans. Could we actually survive in such a scenario? But what about us humans? Could we survive? It's a fascinating question. On Earth, we are so used to gravity that we often take it for granted. It's what keeps us grounded, literally. Without it, our entire way of life would be turned upside down. Imagine trying to go about your daily routine with everything floating around you. It would be incredibly disorienting and challenging. Well, astronauts live in space without gravity, right? They seem to manage just fine. But here's the thing. They undergo extensive training and preparation to handle the zero-gravity environment. They have specialized equipment and routines to help them cope. It's not as simple as just floating around and having fun. There are serious challenges involved. But here's the catch. They experience all sorts of health problems. Without the constant pull of gravity, their bodies start to undergo significant changes. Muscles and bones begin to weaken because they are not being used in the same way. This is why astronauts have to exercise regularly to try and counteract these effects. But even with all the exercise, they still face health issues.
Without gravity, our muscles and bones would start to weaken. This is because our bodies are designed to work against the force of gravity. When that force is removed, our muscles and bones don't have to work as hard, and they start to deteriorate. This can lead to a host of problems, including muscle atrophy and bone density loss. It's a serious issue that astronauts have to deal with, and it would be a major problem for us if we suddenly found ourselves in a zero-gravity environment. Our hearts wouldn't have to work as hard to pump blood, which might sound nice, but it would actually cause all sorts of problems. The heart is a muscle, and like any other muscle, it needs to be exercised to stay strong. Without gravity, the heart doesn't have to work as hard to circulate blood, and it can start to weaken. This can lead to cardiovascular problems and other health issues. It's another example of how our bodies are designed to function in a gravity-rich environment. And don't even get me started on the challenges of eating and drinking in zero gravity. It's messy. In space, astronauts have to use special containers and straws to eat and drink. Without gravity, liquids form into floating blobs, and food particles can drift away. It would be incredibly difficult to have a meal without making a huge mess. Plus, there's the issue of digestion. Our digestive systems are designed to work with gravity, and without it, we could face all sorts of digestive problems. So, while the idea of floating around in zero gravity might sound fun, the reality is that it would be incredibly challenging and potentially dangerous for us humans. So after all that chaos, I think it's safe to say that gravity is pretty important. Imagine a world without it. Picture yourself floating aimlessly, unable to stay grounded. Everything around you, from the smallest pebble to the tallest skyscraper, would be adrift. It's the invisible force that holds our world together, literally. Gravity is what keeps our planet in orbit around the sun, ensuring that we have a stable climate and seasons. Without it, Earth would be a chaotic place with no sense of direction or stability. It keeps our feet on the ground, our atmosphere in place, and our planet from falling apart. Think about the air we breathe. Gravity keeps it wrapped around our planet, providing us with the oxygen we need to survive. Without gravity, our atmosphere would drift away into space, leaving us gasping for breath. Without gravity, life as we know it would cease to exist. Plants wouldn't be able to grow, as they rely on gravity to anchor their roots and draw nutrients from the soil. Animals, including humans, would struggle to move and function in a weightless environment. Our entire ecosystem would collapse. So the next time you jump up and feel gravity pulling you back down, take a moment to appreciate this amazing force. It's not just a scientific concept, it's a fundamental part of our everyday lives. From the way we walk and run, to the way we play and relax, gravity is always at work, making sure we stay connected to our planet. It's not something we can see or touch, but it's essential for our existence. Gravity shapes the world around us, influencing everything from the formation of mountains to the flow of rivers. It even affects the way our bodies function, helping to regulate our blood flow and maintain our muscle and bone strength. So let's take a moment to marvel at this incredible force that keeps our world in balance and makes life possible. Well, there you have it, science fans. A day without gravity would be a wild, chaotic, and ultimately disastrous experience. It's a good thing gravity is here to stay. I hope this thought experiment has helped you appreciate the incredible power of this often overlooked force. Until next time, keep asking questions and stay curious.